Before becoming a parent coach, and in fact, before becoming a parent, I was a neuropsychologist. And being a neuropsychologist, I have a deep appreciation for what is called executive functions. In fact, I would argue that the skills that comprise executive functioning are just as important, maybe even more so, than reading, writing, and arithmetic. So, what is executive functioning? How do we support our kids in building these all important skills? And how do we continue to work on them ourselves as parents? Because let's be honest, it's challenging for us too. For today's conversation, I am joined by Carrie Bonnett. She is an executive function coach who works with students and families using a practical, no shame, brain first approach that empowers students to thrive, helps parents and teachers and gives adults tools to stay on top of all that life requires. And I know we could all use help with that. Let's dive in. Welcome to Single Parenting with Connection, Not Perfection, the podcast that honors your messy reality. It's the support you crave without the usual emotional landmines. I'm your host, Dr. Gila, and I promise I will never tell you to just tag your partner in. Before we start, quick reminder. While I am a licensed psychologist and a certified coach, this podcast is not coaching and it's not therapy, and it's not a replacement for medical or psychological advice. It is for educational and informational purposes only. All right, let's dive in. Carrie, welcome to the podcast. It's always great to chat with you. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Gila. I'm glad to be here too.
You are an executive functioning coach. I'm a big fan of talking about executive functioning, and it is something that I think we're starting to hear more about. It's become a little bit of a buzzword, but it can be a confusing concept. So I'd love to hear how you explain this big, gnarly, complex concept. What is executive functioning?
But let's start with the term. I wish we had something else to call it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you say it is becoming a little bit more understood and a buzzword maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
definitely in the world of parenting and in teaching and education. But it also is very confusing because it makes people think of executives, CEOs,
Mm-hmm.
or corporate stuff, right? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, let's start there, which is
Yeah.
that I wish we could call it something else, but executive function I think comes from the term execute. So the what we're talking about when it comes to executive function is I like to describe they're the brain skills that help us get things done. So like
Mm.
they help us execute tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I've also added kind of in recent years. I've started to add the word important in there. They're the brain skills that help us get important things done.
Uh,
So what are we talking about? We're talking about time
mm-hmm.
management, time awareness. We're talking about planning. We're talking about organization. We're talking about emotional control, impulse control, getting
Mm-hmm.
started. Gosh, that's one that like just the task, or excuse me, the skill of getting started on something that's
Yeah.
important, but we don't really want to do it. That comes up a lot in my work with students and
Mm-hmm.
families. Those are the
Like getting your
types of
kid to
things.
get in the shower.
Yeah. To get started on the homework or to
Yeah.
get in the shower or to even start the face routine. I have a couple teenagers in my house. And so they're, some acne and
Mm-hmm.
like just the getting over the one. In fact, one of my son who's 15, he's used to wait till the very last minute right before bed to wash his face. And like, here's something that we've implemented in our house, which is like, how about you wash your face after dinner? Instead
Mm.
of, because at the end of the night, I don't know about you, but I'm like this too. Like, I don't want to get my face wet and I don't want to put my hair back, whatever. So, anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that's just like a super simple thing that we changed. But those are the things like getting started on
Mm.
the boring thing or the thing I don't want to do, or right now I'm too tired, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So there's skills like that. That's what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't what would you call it
Yeah.
if we had another thing to call it? I don't really have a good answer for that.
Yeah, it's so tough because also there's this circularity where like I've heard people talk about them as frontal lobe functionings because the frontal lobe
Mm-hmm.
is so necessary for executive functions, but that's a little, first of all, the frontal lobes aren't the only part of the brain that you use for executive function, so it's a little
Right.
misleading and that's not particularly helpful. I
Right.
do think the executive piece, I've heard a lot of people talk about how it is, if you think of an executive of a
Mm-hmm.
company, they are responsible for a lot of the tasks that we think of, these like higher level cognitive tasks. So multitasking and organizing and planning big projects and,
Hmm.
shifting your attention from
Yes.
one thing to another and initiating and monitoring, right? Like
Oh,
keeping
yes.
track of where everything is. And so I do actually think it can be helpful, this term executive, if you think of it that like it's like the CEO of your brain, right? The
Yeah.
CEO functions in your brain.
Yeah.
And it can be hard, I think, for anyone. We talk about math and reading and science as being like core subjects that kids need to learn, but really, executive functions are like underneath all of this, right?
Yeah.
You need the executive functions to even be able to
Totally.
engage in those subjects
Absolutely. I mean, you say it's underneath all of it. I always say like it's sort of like the umbrella. Like
above.
everything
Yeah.
has to come next, right? Like
Well, maybe it's a
um
bubble, it's around it. It's
yes.
like
We love that.
beneath
Let's
and
let
above
you and I are
it.
going to come up with a new image. I like it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was a teacher for a really long time, so I come to this work from the teacher angle. So I taught middle and high school for 14 years.
Mm.
Um, I still have my finger on the pulse of education now, even though I'm not in the classroom. I don't know if you know this, even Gila and I have known each other a long time.
Yeah.
But I teach for University of Portland here in Oregon, in their School
Mm.
of Ed. So I'm an adjunct for them. So I teach early career teachers too.
Mm.
And so coming at it from this education lens,
Yeah.
it like, and thinking about all the kids in my classes over the years, like that's how many of them were successful. It wasn't like how smart they were. I mean, sure, some people smart, wrote an amazing essay, whatever. Yes, but it's the managing.
Yeah.
It's the executive function piece that is really the most critical part. And for the longest time,
Yeah.
myself included, and I think it's shifting a little bit, but like we judge kids who can't manage.
Yeah.
I did it. I'd like to be able to tell you like, "Oh no, Gayla, my whole career I had a heart for the kids who struggled in my class." I mean, did I love the kids, want to have a relationship with them? Absolutely. But I also judged them who were like
Yeah.
couldn't get their work in on time or the impulses in class or just sat
Yeah.
there staring into space because they didn't really understand the assignment or they couldn't get started because it was too noisy or like so
Hmm.
we have a long way to go in education, I think, but I'm glad that it's becoming a little bit of a buzzword, if you will. People are acknowledging that it's not
Yeah.
willful. Maybe we'll get into that.
Yeah, and I was gonna say there's judgments out there, and there's also understandably frustration,
For
right?
sure.
Because even if you understand and empathize with where it comes from, if you have to tell your kid 40 million times to
Mhm.
pick their wet towel off the floor, then you're gonna be frustrated
Right.
and impatient. And so I'd love to hear, there's so much that we can cover
Yeah. We could
here.
spend the whole time talking about like initiating tasks or
I
whatever it is.
know. I know. And I want to say, we hear a lot about executive functioning in the context of
Hmm.
neurodivergence. Um, I just want to like clearly state executive functions are important and challenging for everyone,
Absolutely.
right? Not just kids who are or humans who are
Hmm.
neurodivergent. But it can be an especially big
Absolutely. Yeah,
challenge for certain forms of neurodivergence.
for sure.
I guess as a starting point, do you have any tips for if you are feeling frustrated with your kiddo, not sure where to start? Like where do we start with this? Because it
Mhm.
does feel like this huge thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So many pieces that go into it and
Hmm.
they all interlock and
They're all connected. I
interconnect
know. I
and
was going to say the same thing,
yeah.
right? Yeah. All these skills are, I like to pull them apart, separate
Mm,
them to talk to clients about them, but they're all totally connected, right? Like we
yeah.
have to be able to start the task and then stay focused when we get distracted by so and so next to us. And
Yeah.
then we have to finish the task, which is a whole other skill. And it's
Yeah.
definitely,
And then I want to add, we were just talking about, right? So if you're also getting messaging from lots of people outside that you are being frustrating,
hmm
that you are maybe being lazy, that you are not
hmm
cooperating, all the negative
oh, yes.
narratives that these kids are getting, and I keep saying kids, but adults also,
True. Yeah.
that humans are getting when you do struggle with executive functions,
Yeah.
that then I think can make the executive functions harder,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely,
Because
because you
yeah,
feel crummy about yourself.
yeah.
You asked where to start.
Mm.
I think language really matters.
Hmm.
And getting curious. So, like, making observations. So, if we can zoom out to start, I mean, we notice these things about our kids, adults, people in our life, whatever. We'll
Yeah.
stick with kids because that's who I work with primarily. Although I do have adult clients too. But
Yeah.
like, sort of zooming out and making observations and noticing patterns of like, huh, and then the getting curious piece. I'll
Mm-hmm.
get to the language in a minute, but like the getting curious part about like, huh, could it be an executive function thing? Could it be that they don't have the skill of planning, right? Like
Yeah.
seeing their morning. Let's talk about mornings, for instance, because I know that's often a
So
challenge
hard.
for
Yeah.
parents. Um, not not being able to see the future, really, like how many minutes in the morning, how many hours in the morning or whatever do I have before I have to leave my kids ride the school bus, so like get out the door to
Mm-hmm.
get on the bus. um so just the noticing, like, could it be, what if that is not willful defiance,
Mm-hmm.
and what if it's a skill thing, what if they just can't see time passing
Mm-hmm.
or feel
Mm-hmm.
time passing? Okay,
Right.
so the curiosity piece I think is really important.
Yeah.
um, and then the language you even mentioned, my least favorite word out there for kids is lazy,
Mm.
unmotivated, forgetful,
Mm-hmm.
defiant. So I think language really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And the language, kids hear us.
Yeah.
Even if we're talking to a friend or a
Yeah.
teacher or another, right? Like kids hear us talking about
Yes.
them.
I think that's such a great point. We often forget, right? You're venting to your friend on the phone or to your mom or whoever, and your kid is in another room and you don't think they're hearing, but they hear.
Totally.
Or you're at a play date and you're, venting about it. And so it's important, I think, to have the space to be able to process your own feelings about it
Absolutely. Hmm.
and to be mindful of
Just be
listening ears.
careful. Just be
Yeah.
careful. That not only, yeah, they, like you said, they hear us kind of talking about them, but I also like shifting the language with the child
Yeah.
is really powerful too. So like in my work, I work one on one with students, middle school and up typically. Um, and we talk about, like, I call it using the brain language, which just basically means like they'll tell me like I'm bad at time management
Mm.
or I'm terrible at organization. And
Mm.
we shift that pretty early on. First session and moving on forward is to like shift it and say, my brain struggles with
Love it.
time management. My brain struggles with organization, or I have a brain that struggles with, or whatever. I use those kinds of words, and then they say I'm bad at, and then I keep saying, oh, so your brain struggles with, and I'm bad at. And then eventually towards the end, I say, did you notice that I was saying how good is your
Yeah.
brain at these things, or your brain's, and sometimes they don't even notice. Of course they don't notice because they've been,
Yeah.
experienced this negativity around it all the time, and so they've been probably told in no
Yeah.
uncertain terms that like, yeah, they are bad at that. But
Yeah.
I think the language really matters, so like
And
shifting
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And there's two pieces to that, right? So one is I'm hearing you separate the brain from the self. It's not
Mhm.
your identity,
Yes.
it is a part of you.
Yes.
And I'm hearing you separate the judgment of I'm
Mhm.
bad versus I'm struggling. And
Yeah.
that, when you're talking about shifting the language, that really comes from a shift in the lens,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
How you're looking at and interpreting and judging the problem, quote unquote,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That they're struggling with it versus they're bad at it or they
Well, that
won't
implies
do
they
it.
won't ever get good at it, right? Like if I'm
Yeah.
just bad at time management, then
Mm.
that, like, how can I get better at time management? I mean, that's what I do. I help people, but but it
Yeah.
is. It's like I would rather them say like my brain is struggling right now with getting started on this project for
Hmm.
XYZ reason,
Hmm.
rather than like I'm terrible at getting started. Like
Yeah.
it just implies there's no hope.
Yeah. It's that growth mindset
Totally.
piece.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think it's just as important in the quote unquote positive attributions? So I'm good at math versus
Mhm.
like my
That's
brain
interesting.
does well with math. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think probably. I think we I not being a neuroscientist like you, but
Yeah.
I would say probably, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think, sure, it feels a lot better to say I'm good at math.
Yeah.
But it is
Well,
taking it on as the
yeah.
identity, like me,
Right.
Carrie, good at math, rather than
Right.
it's a brain thing. I mean, that's a brain thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking out loud here because, right, it seems like then let's say they're good at math, they're good at math, they're good at math, and then they hit calculus and suddenly
Hmm.
it's hard.
Hmm.
If your identity is I'm good at math, then what does that do when
Yeah.
you suddenly hit a math thing that you're struggling with?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I remember I tell my kids this, that I thought I was going to be a physical therapist when I went to college.
Mm,
And so I took a bunch of science classes my freshman year and then had got a D on my first chemistry test. And
mm.
I was pretty good at school. I had taken chemistry before in high school and it rocked my world,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying, is that
Hmm.
like, oh my gosh, I was good at science and now I'm not good at science. What do I
Right.
I mean, it did actually change the trajectory of my world.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, what is happening?
Right.
Mhm.
When you have this like fixed identity narrative, it
Mhm.
can be more fragile in a way,
Totally.
right? Because
Totally. Yeah.
one counterpoint, yeah. Okay, so that was a bit of a tangent, but
No,
a
I like it.
helpful
I
one,
like
I
it a lot.
think.
I like it a lot.
Okay, so really starting with the shift in language, which again, I think starts with the shift in mindset,
I
right?
think so too.
In
Yeah.
the lens of how
Mhm.
you see things.
For sure.
And I also, we were talking before we hit record about how I think one thing we don't talk enough about is that a lot of times our kids are struggling with executive functioning, and we, the parent, might also struggle with some of those same. So when I was listening to you and say, well, you need to make observations, monitor, like all of those are executive
Mhm.
functions, right? You need to
Mhm.
monitor what's going on.
Totally.
You need to find patterns in what you're seeing. You need to sort of think about how your thoughts are affecting the behaviors. All of these are related to executive
Yeah.
functioning. And so
Yeah.
first of all, I just want to name that, right? That
Yes.
if you're listening and you're like, but I struggle too. And I think this comes up at school also, especially you see a lot of programs specifically for neurodivergent kids, and often the staff are neurodivergent, and maybe executive functions are something that they struggle with also. So
Mhm.
I'm curious if you have any tips if someone is listening and feeling like this is not my strength either,
Right.
or my brain struggles
Good. Nice work.
with
Mhm. Yeah.
executive
Yeah.
functioning.
Yeah.
What is something that parents can do to sort of work on this for themselves and
For
also
sure.
support their kids?
Yeah, great question. I'm so glad you mentioned this because it comes up all the time in my
Yeah.
work. A couple of things I'm thinking of. One is that be gentle with yourself.
Hmm.
Right? Like just yeah, it's hard. It's hard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we live in a society where strong executive function is kind of valued and moralized, even though we know it's a brain thing and not a character flaw, but
Right.
we live in this society where that is not always the case. So, so
Yeah.
be gentle with yourself. And I say that I work with students primarily, but a lot of the strategies that we talk about in my coaching help parents too. One of the things I do that's a little unconventional, I don't know if you know this even, Gila, but I require at least one parent to be in our sessions with us. I work
Mm.
exclusively on Zoom. So, um, and it's not to like look over the kid's shoulder to make sure they're like paying attention or like whatever, but it's more
Hmm.
because, first of all, the child is often not really ready to go it alone when it comes
Yeah.
to learning this stuff and practicing it in real life. So the parent is there to kind of help with that outside of our
Hmm.
sessions. But the second reason is that often parents will learn things too that, oh,
Yeah.
that's something that I actually could take and use in my life. So I actually require it,
Yeah.
so that both of those things can happen.
I
And
love
so
that. It makes
this,
me think of Suzuki, where you like
yeah, oh yeah,
learn, you do lessons
yes,
side by side with your kid. Yeah.
yes, which I never did, but a friend of mine did. I always thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. It's like learning right alongside. So I think being gentle with yourself, yes,
Hmm.
learning along with your kid, and even
Hmm.
being able to say out loud to your child, like, my brain struggles with this stuff too,
Yeah.
is real powerful.
Hmm.
And then could we learn some of this stuff together?
Hmm.
Um, and then one of my favorite things for parents, especially of younger kids, although the older teens can take it too, they'll just roll their eyes at you, is to narrate out loud what's going on inside your
Yeah.
brain. So, for example, like getting to an appointment on time, which might be challenging for a parent.
Hmm.
Okay, we need to get there at 4:30. So that means like literally narrating out loud to your
Yeah.
kids. So that means that, okay, how long does it take us to get there? It usually takes us 30 minutes to get to this appointment. Okay, great. So that's 4 o'clock. So then we should probably leave, just give ourselves a buffer, like saying that stuff out loud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I think as parents in general, but just especially if a brain is struggling with this stuff, is we don't want to acknowledge that we have to go through all these steps to get there on time, right? But
Yeah.
but we all have this kind of internal dialogue that helps us. So narrating that stuff out loud, I think can be
Hmm.
really powerful, including how you deal with stressful situations, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh dear, we're not going to make it on time. So I'm not going to speed because, whatever it is, like just saying, I'm
Yeah.
going to take a few breaths. We don't need to rush. Just saying that stuff out loud, I think can be
Yeah.
really powerful.
So much. I have an episode all about modeling. It's so powerful. We are modeling even if we don't intend to. You're
Absolutely. Everything we do
you're
is a
doing it
model.
whether you want to or not.
Uh-huh.
And so really like harnessing that and leaning into that, and narration is a way that you can really boost the power
Mm-hmm.
of that. One
Mm-hmm.
question that I had for you, there are a lot of very successful executives who very famously are neurodivergent and probably not have their brains still struggle
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of executive functions.
Yeah.
And part of how they're successful is they surround themselves by people who support them
Yep.
and sort of take on some of the executive function burden, right? They
Yep.
have assistants
Yeah.
and things like that. And I'm curious from your perspective, I imagine there's sort of a combination of trying to build your executive function skills and using
Mhm.
external aids to support. Is there any such thing as overdependence on external aids, do you think? Or is that really part of sort of accommodating the executive function
That is such a
challenges?
great question. Science wise, I don't really know whether there's sort of over accommodating, but I
Hmm.
will tell you just data from my own coaching practice, which is that the students who come to me, and truly it's parents first who come to
Right.
me, and then we work together with their kid, but who come to me, they are wanting to get better at
Hmm.
time management, planning, organization, emotional control. And I
Yep.
do think, I mean, there is data that can happen, right? Like
Hmm.
brains can change.
Hmm.
It's not fast. I wish it were, like magic
Hmm.
wand situation, but it's not. But yes, brains can get better at that. But you're right about the strategies and the tools that I work with kids and adults on is I call it strategy shopping, actually,
Hmm.
because you have to kind of shop around to see what works best. But it is
Hmm.
often externalizing, like having external supports, basically,
Yeah.
right? So, like a
Yeah.
calendar, for example, is a very simple example of that. Like I don't know, what day is it? I don't know, is it Tuesday? What's the date? And
Yeah.
being able to externalize that. And so, is there over reliance on calendars? Maybe I might even over rely on my calendar. And my working memory, for example, I blame it on old age now. I'm 51 as we're recording this,
Yeah.
but I think it's always kind of been not strong. Is that remembering like the things that I need to kind of keep front of mind, and
Hmm.
I don't remember anything unless I write it down. So that
Yeah.
maybe am I doing a disservice to myself by doing it writing it down all the time? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it helps me get through the day.
And it also frees up resources for other things. Like I'm thinking of
Absolutely.
how, as kids, like I remembered so many phone numbers and now
Totally.
I don't know any of them because they're in my
Uh-huh.
phone. I don't need to.
Right.
And
I mean, it's a good question. Relying on all of
yeah.
these external
Yeah.
strategies and tools is something that I teach for sure. Is like offloading it, like you said. So
Yeah.
your brain has other things to think about, like offloading that stuff from your brain, so you don't have to be worried about it or consistently thinking about it. Is important.
Hmm.
And yet, I don't know the answer to whether
Yeah.
it's a quote unquote good thing or not.
Yeah. Well, it's probably not as simple as good or bad.
I
There's
think you're probably
probably
right.
different metrics. Yeah.
I'm sure.
But I like what you said about strategy shopping. Is that what
Yeah.
you said?
Hmm.
Yeah, because I think, one thing that I think is an important message is, first of all, that if you use or feel like you need external supports, that is not a failure or a weakness, right? So
Totally.
like destigmatizing some of
Hmm.
that. And that it's okay if it takes you a little bit of time to figure out which
Yes.
external supports are going to be effective
Yes.
for you. And it might look different than,
Yep.
your classmate or
Mhm.
someone else in your family or something like that. Yeah.
Totally. One example of that that I can think of is I was working with a high school student, I can't remember, sophomore maybe, and he was a little resistant, I'm going to say, to using any kind of folder or
Hmm.
binder system, but
Yeah.
he was willing to have the conversation with me and his parents were there, etc. But what we landed on was like, okay, I'm not going to use a folder. It's not going to, he just a little bit resistant part of that. But
Yeah.
we decided that, most backpacks these days have like a sleeve for the laptop or something. And we kind of just landed on, okay, well, what if any paper you get at school always goes in that area of your backpack rather
Yeah.
than just shoved in, kind of to the bottom or with your lunchbox or whatever. Like, so like just that
Yeah.
one little, and that is such a like minor shift from what was happening. What was
Yeah.
happening before is any paper that he would receive at school. And granted, they don't receive as many papers anymore. But any paper he would receive would just get tossed in
Yeah.
and then they would end up bunched up at the bottom and then he either can't find something important like a permission slip or it's just a bunched up mess at the bottom of the backpack. So just even that little shift of let's try
Mm-hmm.
any paper goes in that little sleeve at the back of
Mm-hmm.
your backpack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so like it and that I would I like him to have some sort of a folder? Sure. Or a binder? Sure. But
Yeah.
I can't make a kid do anything. So he has to kind of shop around. It's kind of like I always say like I'm not the kind of coach that hands you like the planner. Here's the one. Here's the one planner that will work for everybody. It's not how brains work. Do I
Yeah.
think you need a calendar as a student? Yep, sure do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
we've got to figure out what's gonna work
Yeah.
for you.
And that trial and error process, I think, is a useful experience in and of
Mhm.
itself because
For
there's so
sure.
many things in life that we do that trial and error.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find so a lot of the examples that you've given, which are I love all these examples, these are super helpful. I hope the audience is enjoying them too. Um, a lot of them sound like really like problem solving specific situations, right? So
Mhm.
when do you wash your face? Where
Yeah.
do you put your
Put
papers?
your paper. Yeah.
Do you find that in working on like problem solving specific situations, that it generalizes to
Mhm.
learning skills that apply to other situations? Like, do they learn how to problem solve that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that we talk about in my work is um, I talk about how there's sort of like six, I call them pillars, but
Mm-hmm.
themes that we
Mm-hmm.
kind of talk about come back to over and over and over again. Like I was
Yeah.
telling you about the working memory, my own brain's working memory, not strong. Um,
Yeah.
one of these themes, maybe you've heard me talk about this before, but is to make the invisible visible. So like
Mm.
there's so many things that are invisible, right? Like
Yeah.
time, number one, um, homework, chores, goals,
Mm-hmm.
expectations for your kids or whatever. All that stuff is invisible. We say it out loud and it like disappears
Yeah.
into the ether. So
Yeah.
so figuring out ways to make the invisible stuff in your face visible.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so what we were I was telling you examples of sort of specific things, the backpack and the washing your face, but
Yeah.
there are some themes which are, routine is one. Like
Yeah.
one of those themes, structure and routine and consistency. Brains really like that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Humans don't always like it, but brains really do.
Mm.
So like the washing your face thing is like try to make it a routine, but also this
Mm-hmm.
invisible visible thing, like time has got to be visible in your face
Yeah.
all the time for us
Yeah.
to see time. And likewise with homework, especially now, like I said, there's so few papers. It's in the iPad or the laptop or the Chromebook, and it is invisible
Yeah.
unless we do something about that. So yes, I think that I often actually start with the more general stuff, like make the invisible visible, and then,
Uh-huh.
in your life, what are some of the things that are disappearing that it would help your brain to have some visible reminder of that?
Yeah, I love that. And back to the question of like, where can we start? I imagine
Mm-hmm.
that if you're feeling like there's just so
That's always a really good
much,
one. Yeah.
right? To
Uh-huh.
to pick one thing
Yeah.
that is, I often have people when there's things that you're butting heads with your kids about, right? And it just feels like everything is a challenge and everything is something that you wish your kid did or didn't do, and it
Mhm.
can feel really overwhelming. And so like writing all of it down and then coming up with like what's the step one, like the
Yep.
priority that we're going to start with, and that can be feel so much more doable and
For sure.
manageable
For
than
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I call it a brain dump, which is what you
yeah,
just
I do
said,
too,
like getting
yeah.
that stuff out of here, listing it all, getting it.
Uh-huh.
I'm stressed about this. I'm wondering about this. And
Yep.
then,
Yep.
kind of pull it
Yeah,
back and choose one thing. Yeah.
because that brain dump also, as you said, it does two things that we talked about, right? It makes the invisible visible,
Hmm.
right? You're putting everything
All those things
on
are real. They're
paper.
floating around in your head. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's offloading
Yep.
the task of remembering it so to
Yep.
free up resources. Like, I don't know about you, but if I have the to-do list items swimming in my head, I'm not going to be able to
Hmm.
fall asleep. But if I write them down, I have
Yep.
put them somewhere. My
Yep.
brain can
Can
rest
rest.
assured they
Hmm.
are somewhere else and I can go to sleep.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I often, adults more than kids do, well, sometimes the students do this, but like have something by your bed. I call it
Yeah.
a later list or something, just like offload it, put it over
Yeah.
there, and I'm
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
I will come back to it, but I don't have to think about it right this minute.
Yep. Yeah. Love it.
So good.
Well, thank you. I think this has been a great little primer on executive functioning with
Yes.
some tips on how to get started. And as you know, I warned you, I ask all of my guests these two questions, so I'm curious to hear your answers. So the
Yes.
first question is, what is something that you do that fosters connection, either with yourself, with your kids, with someone else, with your clients, with someone in your life?
Thinking about my daughter, she's 13 and she's a big time basketball player. So she's got a lot of practice out there in the world.
Mm,
She's busy, this girl.
yeah.
And so sometimes, not every night, but sometimes, just like when she was tiny, we'll read in her bed together. Her book
Mm.
and she's reading her book, I'm reading my book, and we're on this little twin bed. And we're
Ah,
not even really talking to each other, but we're just,
yeah.
sitting next to each other and reading together. And that feels pretty special.
My son and I call that parallel time.
I
And
love it.
it is, it's just like, it amazes me every time how you don't even have to be engaging
Uh-uh.
for it to like fill that connection cup.
Totally.
There's just, yeah, it's magical.
Presence is magic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
Mm.
And somewhere in your life that you've embraced imperfection.
Yeah, I'm not great at this, Gila.
Are you
But
imperfect at answering my question about
yes, I am. But no,
imperfection?
yes, maybe. I would say that I'm a plant lady. I like house
Mm.
plants, and I have a whole bunch of them. And just recently, one of my succulents has bit the dust, and I am trying not to take it personally.
Mm.
I try to just like listen. It's just a plant. If the if the plant if the plant is unhappy, it is okay to say goodbye. So there you go.
Feel like there's like a lot of profound metaphor there. I don't know.
Maybe. Oh boy. I'm a little bit worried about
I
what
won't
that
I won't I won't
says.
psychoanalyze. All right, well, such a pleasure to have you here. If folks want to connect with you, let them know where to do that. And I know you have a really awesome free resource. So
I
why don't you let
do.
us know what that is?
Yeah, so I have a task initiation toolkit, which is 16 real simple ideas for like how to help your student get started when
Hmm.
the thing is boring or when they're tired or when they're distracted or when they just don't wanna. So that you can find at
Uh-huh.
carriebonnett.com/toolkit.
Awesome. And I will put the links in the show notes. And I'm going to download that too, because not only could my kid use it, but I could use
It's
it too.
great for adults too. Indeed.
Awesome. Well, so great to chat with you, Carrie.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Gila.
coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode. I am so glad you found your way here. And remember, even if you're on your own, you don't have to do it alone. You've got this.